Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this World Investment Forum session, where we will discuss the role of special economic zones as engines for the achievement of sustainable development goals. My name is Jacobo. I am the editor of FDI Intelligence, the foreign investment monitor at the Financial Times in London. And more importantly, today I have the pleasure to be moderating this session on such a vital topic. Special economic zones have really become a bastion of global value chains and globalization. As major economies entrench and lift up barriers to trade and investment, special economic zones provide investors with even more valuable opportunities to do business across borders as smoothly as possible. But the demands of tenants are evolving, and special economic zones have to catch up to stay relevant. Just the other day, I was speaking to the head of a big supplier of equipment for the production of microchips. And she told me that her company decided to pull the trigger on a big relocation investment in South Korea only when an industrial park agreed to meet their power needs with renewable energy. And I think that this is a telling example. The success of special economic zones across the globe already hinges on their ability to embed and implement the highest environmental, social, and governance standards, particularly as multinational corporations reassess their global footprint and set in motion new investment strategies accordingly. In this session, we will explore the perspective of some of the stakeholders active in the diverse world of special economic zones and their insights into how SEZs can become major contributors to the achievement of sustainable development goals. Our host, UNCTAD, has done much research into how special economic zones can turn the race to the bottom into a race to the top. So without further ado, let me leave the floor to Mr. James Dunn, the head of investment and research at UNCTAD, for his opening remarks. But before that, James, let me just remind our audience that should any technical problem arise with the platform, an emergency link will be shared for you to be able to reconnect. So this is really it. Mr. James, the floor is yours. James, I think that you're still on mute.
Yes, I just realized that. Thank you, Jacobo. We are so fortunate to have you to moderate this high-level important session, and also a number of other sessions. We really benefit from your expertise and insights. Distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this high-level panel on special economic zones as engine of the Sustainable Development Goals. The special economic zones, in short SEZ, in their various forms, are expanding globally, especially in developing countries. In fact, according to our recent World Investment report, that we calculate special economic zones as mushrooming that reached over 6,000 in numbers worldwide. And on top of that, there's another close to 1,000 of science parks and innovation hubs. In addition, there's another 500 to 600 zones being established. So you can imagine the space is huge, spreading worldwide. And this boom is part of a new wave of industrial development strategies. And this is kind of a response to increasing competition for international investment. So the SEZ vary in terms of modalities structure immensely, including entities such as science parks, industrial hubs, the free trade zones. So facilitating dialogue and cross-fertilization of ideas between these different types of zones could be immensely beneficial. Although there's no one perfect model for SEZ, lessons learned from both success and failures could be extremely important for other zones, especially those still under planning or under construction. So SEZs can make an important contributions to economic development within these geographically delimited areas, governments facilitate industrial activities through fiscal and regulatory incentives and infrastructure support. The zones can help attract investment, create jobs, and boost exports, both directly and indirectly, with plenty of scope and potential to build linkages with the national economies. They can also support global value chains integration, industrial upgrading, and diversification. However, the benefits of the SEZ to broader sustainable economic development are not automatic, and the challenges are many. So SEZ have been criticized, in fact, recently over the years for not adhering to adequate social and environmental standards, and as many first-generation zones often pursued kind of investment attraction strategies centered around the low wages and the lax environmental conditions. This has been unfortunate, and such a kind of perception worldwide still overshadowing the modern zones. So although some newly created zones are going against this trend, the widespread adaptation of measures remains elusive. Extensive implementation of social and environmental standards would unleash the economic potential of SEZs and make them diverse of sustainable development for all. So recent research by UNCTAD presents an economic case for a role reversal, switching from a narrowly focused on cost advantages to becoming champions of sustainability. So against this background, UNCTAD introduced the framework for the Sustainable Development Goals Model Zones, we call it SDG Model Zones, in the World Investment Report 2019. So the SDG Model Zones are a kind of forward-looking and a pioneering concept designed by UNCTAD to function as a kind of a manual of options for gearing SEZ towards 2030 agenda, with the key objectives to make SEZ work for the SDGs, from privileged enclaves to widespread benefits. So conceptually, the options are built around three key elements. First, a strategic focus on attracting investment in SDG relevant activities and sectors. Second, the highest level of environmental, social, and corporate governance standards and compliance in the zones. And the third, promoting inclusive growth through linkages and spillovers. The SDG model zones could help attract investment in SDG relevant activities, adopt the highest levels of ESG standards and compliance, and promote inclusive growth through linkages and spillovers. SDG model zones could also act as catalysts to transform the race to the bottom in terms of sustainability standards for attracting investment, that is through lower taxes, lower rules, and lower standards. Then from that into a race to the top, that is making sustainable development impact in locational advantage. So a key dimension is the social and environmental impacts of SEZ. So ESG practices in the zones have been improving. More than half of the SEZs polled in an UNCTAD survey recently have policies on environmental standards and regulations, and some have even adopted international environmental standards. So this is the positive side. What is more encouraging is that some eco-industrial parks have contributed to circularity, sustainability, and SDGs. These are all commendable. But much work is still needed to promote the new generation zones, as we first envisioned in the World Investment Report. This is in response to the kind of underperforming zones and addresses the triple challenges of reorienting multinational companies' operations to sustainable development, adjusting to the demands of the new industrial revolution and coping with the challenges that the global policy environment is faced with, particularly in terms of trade and investment. So this process of modernizing zones and building SDG model zones can benefit from a global exchange of experience and good practices. And in this context, international cooperation on zone development is becoming increasingly common. A growing number of new zones is being developed through bilateral partnerships and part of development cooperation programs. Regional development zones and cross-border zones spanning 2 or 3 countries are becoming a feature of regional economic cooperation. The COVID-19 caused a collapse of investment flows to sectors relevant to the SDGs and in greenfield investment and investment types that are crucial for productive capacity and infrastructure development. And this really affect sustainable recovery prospects. And this makes the role of the SEZ as an investment attraction tool more urgent. And in this context, international partnerships and synergies between financing partners, zone developers, national policymakers, including investment promotion agencies, and chambers of commerce play a critical role in the transition towards the sustainable development-oriented zones. An increasing cooperation in zones development calls for a kind of global platform that brings together various stakeholders. We believe that given our long-standing contributions in terms of research and technical assistance and cooperation with vast investment stakeholders community, UNCTAD can play a leading role in establishing such a platform to make SEZ work for SDGs, from privileged enclave to sources of widespread benefit. So to realize this vision and building on our experience and collaborative work with our stakeholders community, we are working towards the establishment of the global alliances of special economic zones, in short, GAZET. And this GAZET is in partnership with SEZ associations worldwide, regional ones, global ones, and some national ones where the regional ones are absent in those regions. Our aim is to strengthen the role of existing SEZ in achieving sustainable development and to advance the creation of a new generation of zones as elucidated in our World Investment Report 2019 and supported by 196 member states of UNCTAD and the United Nations. The focus of this alliance should be on policy dialogue, policy advocacy, as well as exchange of experience and peer learning and capacity building. So I look forward to insightful and constructive discussions, and UNCTAD is committed to furthering collaboration with our partners to build further technical assistance and dialogues on special economic zones for sustainable development. I wish to take this opportunity to thank my colleagues, Amelia and Iman, for organizing this excellent event. Thank you very much. Jacobo, back to you.
Thank you very much, James, for your remarks. Obviously, it's my pleasure to be involved. And thanks also for these insights. UNCTAD has produced terrific research into the world of special economic zones, such a diverse and widespread phenomenon. So any efforts into aggregating really the data and trying to come out with coherent policy suggestions is really key for the development and evolution of the phenomenon. And I particularly like this idea of transitioning special economic zones from privileged enclaves to engines of sustainable development, as you say, make SEZ work for SDG. So thanks again, and we will definitely touch upon some of the topics that you raised throughout the pretty articulated program that has been put together for this session. So let me just outline what lies ahead, and then in just a minute we can get started with the program itself. So we will have a first segment with a couple of presentations on the development of international frameworks for SDG-oriented zones. Then we will dig a bit deeper into some of the best practices of zones that have really made SDGs a key priority of their development agenda. And we will also discuss how international partnerships and collaborations can be conducive to the development of successful SDG-oriented zones. Finally, we will wrap up the program by picking the brain on this very subject of the judging panel that contributed to FDI Intelligence Global Free Zones Awards that have just been published. So as you all can see, it's a very intense program, and I'm looking forward to dive into it. But let me also kindly encourage our speakers to be concise. And also follow my time references for their interventions. If just another note for the audience, please, we will have a Q&A session. So I encourage everyone that has any questions for our speakers to use the question window. You should see a window that says what's in your mind. That's the right place to share your questions. We will try to field as many questions as possible. But having said that, let me introduce our first two speakers. That we have each one will have a presentation on international frameworks for sustainable development-oriented zones. The first one will focus on the concept of eco-industrial parks and comes from Ms. Nilgun Das, who is the Deputy Director of the Department of Environment of UNIDO. And I leave it to the next intervention to introduce our next speaker. So Ms. Das, you have 7 minutes for your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jacobo. I have shared my screen. I hope you all see. I'd like to say good evening, good morning, good afternoon, and good morning to everyone who has joined us. And immediately start. I will be talking about eco-industrial parks. An industrial park is a community of manufacturing and service businesses located together on a common property. In an eco-industrial park, member businesses seek enhanced environmental, economic, and social performance through collaboration. In an industrial park and an eco-industrial park could also build upon synergies between the companies and seek collective solutions, but also synergies with the communities around them. In 2016, UNIDO came together with GIZ and the World Bank Group to create an international framework, and we were all using different names. UNIDO used the eco-industrial parks, GIZ, sustainable development zones, World Bank low carbon zone parks. Green was used by many other countries. Circular, for example, was used by China, among others. So we defined the EIP, an eco-industrial park, as a dedicated area for industrial use at a suitable site that supports sustainability through integration of social and economic and environmental quality aspects into its site planning, management, and operations. We issued the first version in 2017 of the International Framework for Eco-Industrial Parks, depending on their investment priorities. For instance, if a park has more emphasis on renewable energy than any other environmental or social issue, they can contribute to different SDGs. However, an EIP puts emphasis on all three pillars of sustainable development, which environmentally sustainable, socially responsible, and of course, economically viable to contribute to competitiveness and prosperity of the country. All in all, the EIP is an effort to provide a differentiation from other zones or parks. So there are basically the key components of our framework, and in the parks, we expect some park management services, that there would be resource efficient and cleaner production leading to circularity, industrial and urban synergies, and to have sustainable communities and natural environment around the park and interaction with these communities. Along these four pillars, the park has to offer some basic services, monitor its state, planning and zoning should be an issue that they manage well. And as you see, environmental performance have to range from both monitoring what they are doing, but to energy, water, waste, material use, and natural environment and climate resilience. Under the social, say monitoring, having some social infrastructure and community outreach and dialogue, and in economic performance, employment generation, local business linkages, and economic value creation. We issued, based on our experience since 2017, the version 2 in January 2021 of the eco-industrial parks. Based on that, the 17 and the new version, we have launched globally a global eco-industrial parks program in partnership with SECO. It is now taking place from east to west, Indonesia to Vietnam, Egypt to South Africa, Ukraine, Peru, and Colombia. And basically, the program supports policy and national regulation development that incorporates eco-industrial parks and the requirements for these. And on the ground, we help park managers and the companies in the parks to identify opportunities and to implement them. So in each of the areas, particularly environment and social areas, and we have been developing tools which are open to everyone on the web to accelerate replication beyond target countries. Now, at the start of our global program, we assessed 50 parks in 8 countries against the 51 indicators. And I just would like you to invite you to look at the colors. Parks, the normal parks, were doing pretty good in the economic area. They were providing basic park services, but then weak on monitoring. And particularly in the environment area, they were really lagging behind. Not so much in all the social criteria, but in some of them, for instance, there was no community outreach. So our program set out to create a common understanding and implementation tools on why you do that, why you become an eco-industrial park, where there are some of these, what do they mean, how do you do that? Very soon, at the end of November, on the occasion of our general conference, we will be launching an online learning program on these. And in these, we are still collaborating with World Bank and the GIZ. In the way of an example, before I stop, I just want to give you an example of the Vietnam where we worked in 5 zones. and we assisted in all these elements, these 5 zones. What we are happy with is that the Vietnamese government in 2018 issued a decree and introduced the concept of EIP in their national legislation. And currently, they are now going ahead defining more specifically, clearly, the incentives that they would provide. How did we do that? We had huge outreach, but so I just am now going to share with you the environmental results. There was electricity, fossil fuel, greenhouse gas emission, water, raw materials, and chemicals use reductions when the companies made nearly 3 million euros per year and continue to make that financial savings, and invested 9 million euros. With that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention and invite you to reach out to me with my email address n.tas@unido.org. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tas, for this insightful presentation. Very interesting to see also the results of your survey and to see where there is still space for eco-industrial parks to improve their performance across different criteria, and also for sharing this meaningful example on Vietnam. Let me now bring in our next speaker for his presentation. We have with us Dr. Samir Hamrouni, who is the CEO of the World Free Zones Organization, an organization that represents 565 members, if I'm not mistaken, in 125 countries. Dr. Hamrouni will have a presentation on the SDR index that defines a new global standard for business and growth and prosperity for special economic zones. Dr. Samir, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
7 minutes.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, Jacobo. Just to update, we reached 800 members, 139 countries. And our members are free zones and free zones associations. So we represent 1,500 free zones out of the 3,000 existing in the world. So I will use what you mentioned as my 70 minutes to present my project of the Free Zone of the Future. And this is the most critical moment in which I will try to share my screen. So, do you see it, Jacobo, please?
I see a Zoom. I see your screen, but I don't see the presentation.
Are you? So it means that I failed. So I will try again. And now, please.
Yes, I see it.
Okay. So as I said, in this 70 minutes, I will present the result of our project. What a coincidence, Ms. Tas, we started also in 2017 in our event in Cartagena de Indias in Colombia. We asked ourselves how a free zone will look like in 25 years. In 2018 in Dubai, we said we don't need 25 years. Can we make it in 3 to 5 years? And in Barcelona, we said we never progress if we don't measure. So we launched an index in order to make this happening. We call it Index of Prosperity Index. We give it an Arabic name. SDR means prosperity in Arabic, somehow to say that we Arab people from time to time have good and peaceful ideas. Free Zone of the Future is Free Zone 4, which is 1 + 3, 1, business excellence and economic contribution, 3, best-in-class innovation and sustainability. Business excellence and economic contribution, a free zone should be the best place to do business in the country and should every year improve its economic contribution, increasing job creation, improving export and attracting more investors. Best in class, a free zone is a place where we have the best investors, best technology, and it should be able to collect and share the knowledge. safety and security for people, money, intellectual property, and goods. It is not that we have that red carpet, that we have to allow ourselves some illicit activities. Tech-ready zones should be digitally ready for the future. Innovation, we have not to focus on multinationals, we have to focus on future multinational. The future multinational today is a small and medium enterprises, and of course, future small and medium enterprises is a young entrepreneur today. So we need to have activities that encourage entrepreneurship. 75 to 80% of the companies within the zones are small and medium enterprises. We need to have specific activities for these companies, and we need to be enough innovative, including risk management and other tools in the way we manage the zones today. We understand by sustainability, environmentally friendly, we have created a certificate called the Green Zone Certificate in order to manage in a better way, in a more efficient way, all what is related to natural resources use. Every zone should be a good place to work, job of quality, quality of job, including gender issues, and every free zone should have its corporate social responsibility program. We did it because we think this is what are the major challenges of the free zones in the next 25 years. And we did it in the way that I'll explain later, that would help zones to make it happen in 3 to 5 years. We did it also because, as is the topic today, the United Nations have created this set of 17 sustainable development goals, and we need, and we strongly believe that the free zones have a role to play in this objective, but they need a right framework for it. And this is why we have created our SDR program. As you can see, it is a unique initiative that contributes to the 17 SDG. So as I said, first step, business excellence and economic contribution. This is somehow the starting point. This is the baseline. So free zone will be asked to present some element related to the labor, employment, their well-being, economic contribution, as I said, import, export, job creation, investment, attraction of small and medium enterprises, multinational corporation. Also in the business excellence, how easy is doing business within that zone and what quality of services we are having there. And after, some description of the infrastructure, facilities, and other elements related to the incentives and the competitiveness. Our idea, this will be updated every year, and thanks to the next step, every year free zone should manage. The other 3 elements, 3 pillars, best in class, innovation, and sustainability, each one of them, as I have mentioned, is based in 3 elements, and each one of these 3 elements is divided in 5 sub-criteria. So totally 45 questions. And the answer to the question is not yes or no. The answer to the question, we use what we call the maturity curve. So if I go to the first question of the first pillar criteria, do you have a knowledge action plan? The answer is not yes or no. It is not 1 or 0. If it is like this, we will have always the best free zones ranked the best. The answer, it is from 1 to 5. Do you have a knowledge action plan? Yes, I have it, but it's not implemented. The judge will share with you a template of a knowledge action plan and give you 1 point. Do you have it, but it's not implemented and no action has been taken? 2 points. You have it, but no criteria or no KPIs are implemented. 3 points. And this is why, how we will do it. Each one of the 45 questions will be ranked or somehow rated from 1 to 5. We did it because we would like to assess the current level of capability of the free zone. We would like to promote continual improvement of the performance, and we would like to help free zone to reach this maturity level. So it is, we are not looking here somehow to rate, we are looking here to encourage free zone to continuously promoting, performing better and reaching the prosperity of the country. As conclusion, it is open for already existing zones independently of the size and the nature of the zone. It will be open also for future to be, as James said, there are 500 and we think there are much more in the pipeline zones. It is recommended to share best practices. It is a roadmap from the future. We calculate and we estimate 3 to 5 years to finalize the journey to become a free zone of the future. We are not looking here for competition. We are encouraging for continual improvement and monitoring the performance. So this is our SDR index, the free zone of the future. We, as I mentioned it is the result of 4 years of experience. We piloted in 2020 and then 2021 in more than 30 free zones. We will start promoting it in the next month. The opening of the adhesion will be January to 2020. The closing will be March 2022, and the results will be presented in our next global event, scheduled in Jamaica, 13 to the 17th of June, under the theme, Free Zone, your partner for resilience, prosperity, and sustainability. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't use my 70 minutes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samir. I'm impressed you used only 7 of your 70 minutes. So you've been very concise. No, thank you again for your insights and for outlining what you envision as the journey for the SEZ of the future. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing also the results of this exercise at your annual gathering next year. So again, let me thank our first 2 speakers, Dr. Samira Rooney and Ms. Nilgun Tas. And now it's time to move on to our first panel discussion of the day, where we will hear about real life examples of some of the best practices developed by zones where special economic zones when it comes to pursuing sustainable development goals. We have 3 speakers for this panel discussion, so let me introduce them and we can get going with the discussion. Connecting from South Africa is with us Mr. Bert Ollerman, who is the Director of Regional Industrial Development at the South Africa Ministry of Trade, Industry and Competition. Connecting from Beijing, I believe, we have Mr. Douglas Jia Zeng, who is a senior economist at the World Bank. And connecting from Vienna, we have Mr. Dejan Teixeira, who is the director of the Department of Agribusiness at UNIDO. Welcome everyone again. We have 20 minutes for this panel. So again, I will have a few rounds of questions for each one of our speakers. Again, let me encourage each one of you to be concise. And let me start with you, Mr. Ollerman. So can you tell us and share with us more about the experience of South Africa in developing special economic zones that can contribute to the achievement of sustainable development goals? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacobo. You no doubt understand that, actually 20 minutes is way too little time to actually really get into the detail, but I'll try and be brief. I think probably one of the core things that we are doing is integrating the SDGs and the Eco-Industrial Park framework specifically into our policy framework. I think that's a very important first step. I think it's very difficult to do these things after the fact. So it's really useful to build it into your policy framework, number 1. Number 2, we've embarked on an Eco-Industrial Park program in support of SEZs and all our industrial parks actually in the country. So it's actually broader than just special economic zones. The reason for that is that if we actually want to have an impact in terms of the SDGs and climate change specifically, I don't think one can only focus on SEZs. There are a lot more other kind of industrial spaces that are available. So we are trying to address those as well. So we have an Eco-Industrial Park program, which works very closely with the global Eco-Industrial Park program that Ms. Tas spoke about. South Africa, as you saw, is one of the participants in that program. So we're doing that. And then maybe just a third intervention I can just briefly mention is we are trying to do a number of on-the-ground projects. One of them has been for example, a program on net zero water in one of our SEZs, the Atlantis SEZ down in the Western Cape near Cape Town, where we're really looking at SDG 6 specifically, and how can you introduce certain measures to actually get to a net zero kind of SEZ environment. Let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ollerman. Very interesting, and I would like to come back to you on this experience, for example, of net zero water initiative in that specific zone later on. But let me now bring onto the panel Mr. Douglas from Senior Economist at the World Bank. I understand that you have done you've done quite a number of researches. You focus your research on eco-industrial parks in China. So do you want to share some of the background of your research and some of the main conclusions that you have come to? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobo. It's a really great honor to be a panelist for this great session. By the way, just a small correction. Actually, I'm connected from Washington, D.C., not Beijing. So 12 hours time difference. So in terms of the ERP work and the SDG SEZ, actually we World Bank, as the UNIDO, our colleague mentioned, we also partner with UNIDO and also GIZ to implement eco-industrial park all over the world. So we have pilot projects in actually now around 30, 30 kind of pilot projects in all the regions like Middle East, Egypt, and Europe, Turkey, Uzbekistan, East Asia, Vietnam, like in South Asia, Bangladesh. Then also we have the Ethiopia in Africa, Mauritania, and some Central American countries. So so that's the projects we are doing. So these are really progressing very well. For example, in Bangladesh, we have projected that by 2026, more than 20,000 tons of GHG ammunition will be mitigated. In Turkey, also we work with organized industrial zones to implement this kind of framework. In Morocco, similar approach was taken. Now, I'm quickly introduction of China's green transformation through eco-industrial parks. By the way, I have a publication on this on the World Development Journal in recent issue. So the China launched ERPs in 2001. They have different names, of course. Some call it low carbon pilot zones. Some call it circular economy pilot zones. Some call it ERP zones. So they're all first category of ERP. So far, they have more than 300 this kind of pilots. Some already actually got certification from the central government as the official eco-industrial park. Actually, one of the very important feature for this ERP is that they're not just have a strong environmental performance, but they also have the economic competitiveness. In terms of the environmental competitiveness, from 2011 to 2015, about 5-6 years time frame, all these ERP pilots, they reduced land use per unit of industrial added value by more than 30%. Energy consumption declined about 32%. And also the freshwater use per unit IAV is declined more than 33%. And also the industrial waste reuse rate increased to 90%. And also the compressive utilization rate of industrial solid waste increased to 94%. And also, if you look at all the eco-industrial parks among 2,000 industrial parks, and among the top 30 zones, 23 are eco-industrial parks. That's accounts about 77%. And if you look at all the top 10 zones, industrial zones, ranked among the 2,000, all of them are eco-industrial parks. That's really some highlights. They achieved both environmental efficiency, competitiveness, and the economic competitiveness. That's a very, very impressive. Thank you. I stop here.
Thank you, Mr. Zhang. Thank you also for these insights and pretty remarkable achievements. We can touch upon, dig a bit deeper afterwards, but now let me introduce our bring in our third panelist, Mr. Tezera from UNIDO. I understand, Mr. Tezera, that you have been doing quite a number of projects in the space of agro-industrial parks as part of your mandate at UNIDO. So do you want to share some of the background of your activity in that space? And what have you been focusing on when it comes to connecting agro-industrial parks and SDGs? Thanks.
Mute myself. Thank you, Jacobo, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by thanking our colleagues from UNICTAD and UNIDO who have organized this forum to discuss the special economic zones as engines of SDGs. I will focus my intervention in one form of special economic zones, namely agro-industrial parks, sometimes called integrated agro-industrial parks or integrated agro-food parks. And then their contribution to the industrialization and structural transformation process with the focus of our experience, UNIDO's experience, work in Africa and mainly in Ethiopia and Senegal. The main objective of these parks is attraction of investment in agriculture and agro-industry sector. There are two kinds of agro-industrial parks. One is focusing on processing textile and leather products with the objective of attraction of foreign direct investment, mainly enterprises migrating from high-wage to low-wage countries in the textile and garment and leather product sector. These investments are relatively low-tech and labor-intensive. So they have relatively low backward linkages to agricultural sectors, as textile, the raw materials, textile and leather could be imported to produce garments and leather products. So the backward linkages to agricultural sector is a long-term process. The objective is mainly then the job creation for young people and increased export performance of the countries. Sometimes there is a fast growing interest and initiative for developing agro-industrial parks and agro-food parks from different stakeholders, including developing countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and from international financial institutions for financing larger scale industrial infrastructure development. And also the development partners, that means donors, want to scale up their development projects for job creation, food security, and reduction of, let's say, minimizing the rural-urban migration. The second type of agro parks which we are working on are integrated agro-food parks, also called agro-food parks. These parks, unlike the textile and leather parks, develop cluster of industries in a large processing area of up to 1,000 hectares, creating complementarities for sourcing of efficient utilization of raw materials. These parks are developed in rural areas, which is close to farmers and the raw material. At the same time, they are also close to big cities and towns where the market or the consumers are. The parks have a state-of-art infrastructure, including several shared facilities, such as dry and cold storage facilities, common logistics center, waste treatment and recycling system, maintenance and training facility, packaging services, and in some cases, also residential areas for workers in the enterprises located in the agro parks. This infrastructure drastically reduces initial investment and operation of by tenant enterprises. The enterprises in the park, from the study we did in Ethiopia, invest less than 10% of the enterprises investing outside the park. The operational cost is also drastically reduced up to 40%. The farmers within the catchment area of, let's say, 100 to 200 kilometers radius of the central processing unit are linked to the enterprises in the park through what we call rural transformation centers or RTCs. These rural transformation centers provide extension services, which are normally provided by public institutes, like Ministry of Agriculture, which is usually inefficient. But the enterprises in the park provide through their agents, provide extension services on particular technology so that the enterprises acquire raw material of desired quality and quantity. These rural transformation centers, or RTCs, also act as an aggregation center for the farmers' produce, and they are also used for pre-processing, like pre-cooling, grading, and also jointly transporting the produce to the parks. The parks will create also an industrial ecology, as described by my colleague Nilgun, at the different stages of the process from the farm to fork, by conserving and reusing resources, building industrial symbiosis between the enterprise and the park, and reducing post-harvest losses, which is as much as 40% for fresh produce. And this reduces also post-harvest losses, creating value from waste, contributing to the circularity of the economy.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tezera. Let me stop you there. Okay. We can come back to you in a while and dig a bit deeper into your own experience. But let me now go back to Mr. Ollerman and then bring back some of the points that he touched upon in his first intervention, and particularly how, if you can elaborate a bit further into that experience of how you identify that challenge in terms of water uses in that specific zone that you mentioned, and how you worked with the tenants and the zone operators to address that challenge. Thank you.
Again, I will try and be short. First of all, that project was funded by GIZ. So GIZ really is a fantastic partner for us, which is part of our approach to eco-industrial parks and sustainable industrial spaces, for that matter, is really partnerships and collaboration. So what we did is we introduced the water stewardship guide, which is part of the standard operating procedures that we as the DTIC, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, are developing for industrial spaces. Okay, and the purpose of that is, of course, to aid management entities to actually have some kind of common base from which to operate. So that water stewardship guide then helped us look at the whole catchment management area for that Atlantis Special Economic Zone. Fortunately or unfortunately, it still has a very small number of tenants, so it was actually fairly easy to do that. But I think what is key that came out of that whole piece of work was, first of all, the necessity to engage the local community. Okay, we always talk about industrialization and SEZs a lot. Okay, but there's not sufficient attention given to the social dimension and actually integrating that with, you know, the local community activities. So there was intervention in that space. Out of that, of course, what resulted was, first of all, a greater awareness of people in terms of, you know, how do you manage the water. Secondly, there was a plan put forward that came out of that study that identified the key areas of intervention of what you can do to actually come to a net zero special economic zone. Okay, I'm not going to go into those details. I mean, that's just going to take too long. Okay, but the point is, you can actually do it, first of all. Secondly, I think what counted in favor of the Atlantis Special Economic Zone especially was day zero in Cape Town, which you might be familiar with. So Cape Town had no water supply except for a month or two a couple of years back. It was really touch and go. So there were huge water restrictions. The impact on industry and normal production practices was massive. The power of that was actually that it informed a lot of the thinking in terms of resilience for special economic zones when you talk about water. I can stop there. I mean, if you want me to go into particular details, I can do that. I don't know if that helps.
Maybe it would be interesting also to, just in a nutshell, to hear more how you define net water zero. What yes. does it mean?
Okay. I think in simple terms, it means that the water that comes into the park is exactly balanced by the water that goes out. Okay, so you're not wasting water. Okay, so the water that you use, you can reuse. Okay, or you feed back into your aquifer or whatever format that you have, that your water feeds into the park. So you have no, effectively it means that your water efficiency is as high as possible. So you're trying to get it as close to 100%. Okay, you try and introduce water treatment. So there's water treatment actions that you can bring in. We've looked at catchment of water from rooftops, for example, from rain, so that you minimize the amount of water that you put in. And if you do that, of course, then you have a minimum amount of water loss. So that's really what you're looking at. So there's a balance in terms of the water that comes in, the water that goes out.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Ullman. And I guess it's such a vital topic in a way that many of the new industrial processes or industrial productions, like I think of electronics, microchips, and many others, they are really, really water intensive. They need a lot of water for the cooling systems. And so I guess this is really a key challenge for anyone in this space. Mr. Zeng, you mentioned in your study on eco-industrial parks across China, it's a very diverse and wide universe of different parks with different denomination. But you mentioned some of the achievements that these industrial parks can be able to achieve, and I think that particularly remarkable was the better, the more efficient processing of waste or reduction of waste, if I'm not mistaken, that you have mentioned in your first intervention. So do you want to give us also more of a practical example of how these results have been achieved by these parks across China? Thank you. Sure.
Thanks. So I think the major reason that China achieved this EIP results is that this really it's highly emphasized by the central government, right? They put a great effort in terms of green transformation. So I think what's important is that they defined this eco-industrial park framework nationally, right? And as we mentioned just now, we have the international framework, right? But also this international framework needs to be actually tailored into the national perspective, national context. So in China, they have done this well. So they have the national framework, although they have 3 ministries doing this, but more or less they have a common framework in terms of the environment, energy, all these. So they're pushing from different angles. But in the end, I think it's important is that there's a framework and there are some standards to follow, because each ministry come out with standards. Otherwise, it's difficult for the zone level to implement what is the targets, right? We think 5 years, 10 years, what kind of goals they should achieve. So that's actually the first step is very important from the government side. Then also from the incentive side, they provide certain incentives for the zones to implement, for example, adopt green technologies, build green infrastructures. One of the things that they have some allowance from the central government, and also some tax credits for you to implement such initiatives. So these incentives is also very, I think it's very effective. I think one of the things that mobilized the local governments, not everything. Central government define policy, but what's being implemented is from local, right? So the provincial governments and municipal level governments are really put it into this and they're on top of the agenda, because they know this is the green transformations next, for the future zones to survive. They need to really meet the green standards because they understand also the EU standards for the export. All these are actually the strengthening. For the future to be competitive, there needs to be really to make it great transformation towards the green. So that's actually the awareness of the zone level. That's also very important. So this kind of like from a top level to the for the bottom level, two sides, they work together, right? So that's the I think the most important reason why they achieved such a results in a relatively short time. And one example is like Suzhou Industrial Park. This is always ranked at #1 in China because this is not just economically competitive, but also the environmentally they adopted lots of experience from Singapore. This is, by the way, this is joint park between Chinese and Singapore government, right? So they utilize this EIP framework from early on, so that they actually set up an example for the rest of the other zones to actually adopt, because their success, other zones actually encouraged or inspired to actually learn from their experience. So this kind of pilot approach is also one of the things that are very important. They didn't start from 2,000 zones altogether, but they started from a few that gradually actually roll out to more zones, right? So this approach is also always successful in China. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zhang, and I couldn't agree more that China has really been an example of how to use zones and special economic zones as test beds for new policies. Also, as you mentioned, in this field of making the operation of these parks more compatible with models of sustainable development. Thank you again for these comments. And now let me get back to you, Mr. Teixeira. I understand that at UNIDO in your own activity, you have worked on 2 specific agro-industrial parks in Ethiopia and Senegal with a strong component of sustainability embedded in the design and development of the parks. Do you want to share with us some of that experience? Thank you. You're still on mute, Mr. Teixeira.
Yeah. Thank you, Jacobo. I think we are working, of course, in Ethiopia, in Africa in general. We have certain agro-food parks being developed in Africa. They are at different stages of development. But the 4 parks in Ethiopia and the 3 parks in Senegal are developed in a very modular way. That means we develop only the horizontal infrastructure with a few shades for small and medium enterprises with common facilities. So all these parks have the state-of-the-art waste treatment plant, where again, probably we call it a zero waste. All the water is utilized. There is a rain harvesting system, and then the energy is used in the parks, especially in rural transformation centers, are decentralized renewable energy, whether wind and solar power. So the development of the parks in a modular way also helps us to update the requirements, the new requirements, whether it is social, environmental requirements of the region or the government, to include them in the new designs. And that's what the challenges was. Most of the challenges we face in UNIDO while operating in developing countries is a gross underestimation of the complexities of the development of the parks, including meeting the environmental and social standards required by the investors, mostly when we develop the infrastructure. The international financial institutional financing, they have very stringent environmental standards to meet. So we help the government to meet all these requirements, and then we have successfully established those things. The most important thing is that, and Nilgun mentioned, we have been working on eco-industrial parks, in some cases greening of industrial parks. So we have created also an e-learning platform with UNIDO for policymakers and practitioners as a step-by-step guide to industrial parks development. And these guidelines have been established. We are now finalizing a guideline specific for development of agro-food parks in partnership with African Development Bank, FAO, our sister agency FAO, African Union Development Agency, World Bank, China Exim Bank, and so on. So with all these things, we are moving more into green industrial parks.
Thank you, Mr. Teixeira, also for this intervention. And let me also thank the other panelists, Mr. Bernd Ollermann from the Regional Industrial Development at the South African Ministry of Trade, Industry and Competition, and Mr. Douglas Jua Zeng from senior economist with the World Bank. And now we move on to the next segment, where after exploring institutional frameworks and after hearing about more sort of like experiences on the ground from the last panel, we will focus now on the role of international partnerships towards sustainable development oriented zones. And before introducing the speakers, let me also encourage again our audience to share their questions through your question chat box on your platform, because after this segment we will field a few questions from the audience. So without further ado, connecting from Dubai, we have Mr. Ismail Shaheen, who is the Executive Director of the World Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, or WIPA, which represents more than 170 members in 130 countries. And connecting from, correct me if I'm wrong, Gustavo from Tenerife, we have Gustavo González de Vega, who is the president of the Asociación de Zonas Francas de las Américas, or ASFA, which brings together about 600 zones with more than 10,000 tenants across the Americas. So welcome to you both. Mr. Shaheen, let me start with you. So do you want to give us a feeling of how at WIPA you are coordinating with your base of investment promotion agencies to push and promote an SDG agenda also with local special economic zones? Thank you.
Thank you, Jacobo. I should also make an update about the number of members. It's around 126 and hopefully increasing. And I do believe that investment promotion agencies and SCZs have very complementary roles. Let's look at it from IPA's perspective, first of all. You know, IPAs are known as the bridge between the business and government, and that they promote and attract FDI, but on the other hand, they facilitate investments and they provide aftercare services, and which is, in my opinion, one of the most important duties that they do, and they advocate on behalf of investors to assist policymakers to create more user-friendly business climate, either by providing feedbacks to their governments for the creation of a new regime by publication of all laws or regulations. And if this mechanism works well, and from investors to IPAs and from IPAs to policymakers, and if it works efficiently, the outcomes are utilized not just by a single company, but actually by the whole sector and even whole investment ecosystem in respective countries. And our survey results clearly indicate that, of course, COVID has significantly disrupted investment and influenced the work of IPAs, I would say. And this impact is forcing IPAs to adjust their everyday activities, rethink organizational functioning, and upgrade their strategies. And this likely motivated IPAs to create a closer connection in their local ecosystem. And thanks to the close relationship with their respective governments and profound knowledge of local businesses and markets, IPA play an important role in alleviating the impact of COVID-19, let's say, on their local economy by providing support to existing businesses as well. As it was mentioned in UNCTAD's World Investment Report, SCZs are designed to increase exports and employment, development of skills, attracting foreign investment, and developing capabilities in selected industries. And for their overall success, strong long-term vision and institutional supports are essential, of course. Very often they are used as a pilot project for wider economic reform, and almost always involve the attraction of FDI, therefore making it highly related to what investment promotion agencies are doing. And as a matter of fact, substantial number of SCZs are managed by IPAs as well. According to the survey that we've conducted with World Bank, 28% actually are managed by IPAs. In addition to that, IPAs are assisting in attracting new investors to these zones, sharing information on new developments in SCZs policies, and building an investor-friendly image of the country abroad. And it was mentioned in James's speech and shown in Nilgün Hanım's presentations. The early generation of SEZs were often criticized for their negative contribution to the environment. However, as they started including new and more knowledge-intensive sectors, they have been credited for improving environmental performance of host countries. As SEZs have successfully been used as a testing ground for new reforms, policies, and approaches to improve the business environment, this makes them a perfect tool, let's say, for embracing green standards and policies that can contribute in reaching UN SDGs. During the current recovery process, when it comes to that, numbers are getting, let's say, not directly optimistic, but getting slowly closer to optimistic, let's say. And it's indeed a sign that the competition is going to get tougher and tougher between the countries to attract more FDI. Despite this pressure, despite, let's call this a post-pandemic pressure, a growing majority of IPAs are prioritizing SDGs and targeting, let's say, qualitative investments rather than quantitative investments. In this recovery process, in my opinion, IPAs and SEZs can jointly work together, not just to attract sustainable investments, but also to support each other to provide aftercare services. During the pandemic, we've seen IPAs have shown how important role actually they could play. And their success actually comes from the collaboration. They are coming from that culture. Promotion can be done alone, as you could agree with me, but facilitation, aftercare, and especially advocacy requires very strong collaboration, especially while targeting sustainable investments. We may quickly make a list of potential areas of cooperation between IPAs and SEZs under maybe 3 services, let's say. While promoting attracting SDG-friendly investments, IPA are always in need of advantageous sectors, providing proper infrastructure, let's say proximity to logistic hubs to be marketed to potential investors. And that's exactly actually what SEZs are providing. Many IPAs have been suffering to find such locations to be offered to their clients. And in case they can establish a proper coordination platform, I do believe that both institutions are going to win. For example, while providing aftercare services to existing investors in SEZs can be provided with a contact point with the IPAs to provide quick access to their services maybe. And finally, as earlier mentioned, SEZs are testing ground for new reforms, policies, approaches to improve the business environment, which also perfectly fits what the IPAs are providing as advocacy services. And SEZs in that point can pose a perfect role model for new steps to be taken to create a much business-friendly investment environments. All in all, finally, what matters, I think, is to coordinate efforts rather than a destructive competition among these 2 institutions. Both institutions, both entities will be only successful, in my opinion, if they could work together. And when it comes to WIPA, we could, of course, serve as a global platform for exchange of experiences and good practices in attracting sustainable investments, which are, of course, the key for green FDI for SEZs. And WIPA can also facilitate the creation of a partnership between IPAs and SEZs, as well as investors. And I would like to also inform you that WIPA's membership is actually open to any entity whose prime function is to promote any territory as a destination of investments. Therefore, I would like to invite actually all SEZ colleagues to join us to work together and to enhance our collaboration, to learn from each other's experiences for our joint sustainable future. Over to you, Jacobo. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Elshahin, also for this invitation. And let me now bring on to the panel Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. Gonzalez, what are you doing at ASFA in this regard? What are you doing to promote a discussion amongst your members about sustainable development models? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jacopo, and the organizers from UNTAD for this invitation. It's an honor for me to be today speaking about the impact of special economic zones in the Latin America and the Caribbean region as engines for their sustainable development goals. First of all, I would like to give you some figures regarding the social and economic impact of the special economic zones in our region to understand how important are the SDGs in Iberoamerica. Currently, Iberoamerica has more than 600 special economic zones that host 13,000 companies, which generate almost 1 million direct jobs and 2 million indirect jobs in the region. Of course, the economic impact of the special economic zones in the development of our countries is extremely important. And for the same reason, they are the best tools to develop the SDGs in our region. As you know, Jacobo, just yesterday in our meeting for discuss how to work together for the Global Alliance of Special Economic Zones, we have been talking about how our SDGs have been the best ambassadors to bring SDGs standards to our region. And now, more than ever, our free zones have understood that working towards the SDGs is a competitive advantage, even above the common incentives and tax advantages, and not only to attract investment, but also to guarantee the economic and social development of the territories where they are located. As well, yesterday we have been talking about the common challenges faced by our special economic zones, and we think one of the most important is that what about our future? We are thinking about the next generation of special economic zones. So what kind of incentives we can offer to develop this new economy in our spaces? And this could be the concept of special economic zones 4.0 or the future special economic zones. And we think they are the ones that place their people at the center. If something the pandemic taught us is that the people are first, the most important resource is in the current economy, obviously is the human talent. So our next generation of special economic zones are the places where the people want to go to work, where the highest standards of services to people are met. And in this line, we can assure that the special economic zones in our region are today one of the best examples of achieving the SDGs in the 2030 United Nations agenda. And why? This is the point. Well, because from all SDGs in our region, we are working that the human capital is first. And for that, we have created many initiatives regarding the sustainable goal number 8, decent work and economic growth. In fact, if you analyze the figures of an employee working inside the free trade zone versus working outside the free trade zones, their salary is much higher. In some countries, twice and even four times higher. Another important aspect to highlight is that every day, more and more women are working in special economic zones. Some countries, as Dominican Republic, have even rated 50-50 ratio, achieving sustainable goal number 5, gender equality and empower all women and girls. If there is a decent work, then it creates economy. And the first consequence is reduce inequalities. The sustainable goal number 10. We have many examples where the special economic zones have been established in rural and in low-income areas. And as a result, they have been boosters to create ecosystems around them, creating new job opportunities and eradicating poverty, sustainable goal number 1. In addition, if the employee has a decent work, this means that the employer covers all the social and health costs, assuring good health and well-being, sustainable goal number 3. In fact, the recent visit that I have done to the special economic zones in our region, we have seen excellent examples where you can find gyms, jogging tracks, and even yoga rooms for employees. Once more, because the special economic zones have understood that the well-being of the people should be at the center of the park. Another important issue is that the special economic zones are creating education ecosystems, and some even have universities within their zones. In fact, there are examples where special economic zones gather together universities they create the curriculum according to the skill required by the companies. Therefore, it's the creating more job opportunities as the companies are hiring the talent they are looking for. These programs not only give the opportunity of educating to the employees that works at the special economic zones, but their family is also able to the university to go and study, creating positive externalities. This is helping us to achieve the SDG number 4, quality of education, and as effect in number 10, which is reducing inequalities. Because it's not only about the giving employment, it's also about the educating our people. And regarding our infrastructure, as you know, Jacobo, is one of the main competitive advantages that we have in the free trade zones in Latin America and the Caribbean. This infrastructure has all high-level standards, roads, lead building, utilities, digital infrastructure, safety. This is helping us to achieve Sustainable Development Goal 9, industry innovation and infrastructure. Because thanks to that world-class infrastructure, we are attracting industry to be established within our special economic zone, and this industry is creating innovation within the park and bringing knowledge to the small and medium enterprise. Also, of course, many our free trade zones are investing in solar panels and renewable energy, working toward the SDG number 7, clean energy, creating a new concept of green zones. Another sustainable development goal our free trade zones are working is number 11, sustainable cities and communities, because we have understood that a free trade zone by itself, without a community, is not a future free trade zone. Therefore, all this ecosystem is important for creating a sustainable city and community. And that's why in many special economic zones in the region are going to find the whole ecosystem, including airports, ports, schools, universities, I told, and even residence projects, and recently hotels too. Finally, to mention the last SDG that we are working at is the number 17, partnership for the goals. And that's the reason why yesterday we announced the establishment for the Global Alliance on Special Economic Zones, because we are sure that the special economic zones are the best example of achieving the SDGs in our developing economies. So we compromise with the 23rd agenda, and we are here today to tell you that we are working day and night until every special economic zones in the region compromise in a common agenda towards the accomplishment of the SDGs. And this was written in the World Investment Report 2019. Mr. Yang told before, the key objectives should be to make special economic zones work for the SDG. Well, today we would like to make a little change to this phrase and to say the key objective is right now to make a special economic zone work for SDGs, because we are convinced our SDGs bring prosperity for all. So that's it. That is Jacobo. This is our objective, our goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gustavo. And I think that it was a powerful message. And I think that also during the pandemic, we really saw the kind of the leading role that some of these zones can have in their communities, because obviously thousands of people are working in these zones. The lives of thousands of people gravitate around these zones. And I just want to bring up the universe of experiences is very diverse, but I just want to bring up this example of a special economic zone in Poland that during the pandemic organized some yoga or like a physical well-being session at distance with the local volleyball team for their workers. And so this kind of like, it's a simple example, but it really gives you also a feel out to what extent human capital has become a priority for zones across the world, because obviously, as you say, in the knowledge economy, is probably the most important production factor of all. So again, thank you to our last two speakers. We have a couple of questions from the audience. and about like slightly less than 10 minutes. So let me go through this and also end up a few of our speakers to answer these questions. The first question is about integrating green logistics in these models of sustainable zones that are going towards sustainable development models. So maybe Bert Ollerman from South Africa, do you want to answer this question? How, in your own experience in South Africa, are you trying to integrate green logistics in your special economic zones? Thank you.
Thanks, Jacobo. I hope I can answer it. I think in South Africa's experience, what we're working on is really connecting electric vehicles, so EVs, to the industrial park and SEZ space. Obviously, this is, it's early days for us because there still needs to be a greater adoption of electric vehicles in the country. But that for us is one of the core interventions. A second aspect to that, of course, is looking at utilizing electric vehicles, and electric vehicles here is not just battery vehicles. It could be something that runs on fuel cells, for example, as well. Is actually using those kinds of vehicles within the park to also transport, not just goods within the park, but also transport employees. Okay, so you actually want to completely do away with any kind of fossil-based transport mechanism. Okay, so that's in short what we're looking at. It's still early days. We are piloting 1 or 2 areas where we are doing this. We're also looking at electric buses as a mechanism of actually, addressing that. Again, I think, green logistics, a lot of transport companies are actually looking at this. And I think the more infrastructure we bring into the country, partly through the hydrogen initiative, looking at electric vehicles and fuel cell powered vehicles, I think that's the kind of route that we are considering at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. And definitely green logistics is also a big focus of some of the programs that we are seeing also here in Europe, for example, in the UK. A few of the free ports that the government is trying to establish have a strong green logistics, green mobility component. Also in the perspective maybe of becoming production sites of technologies like batteries, or anyway technology in the value chain of green mobility. Okay, we have another question. I think that the question is from our a gentleman called Olafemi Badeyo, and he is asking, his question is more about how to measure the absolute impact of SEZ to the growth of local communities. And obviously he raises the issue that this is obviously a matter of debate. And obviously this is a key point. I was mentioning at the beginning, there hasn't been much research going into measuring the performance of free zones over the years. I think that UNCTAD did a great job in trying to bring to light some of this performance, as well as the World Free Zone Organization and other few organizations. But maybe let me bring back Miss Tas from UNIDO on this. You have shown us that slide regarding the performance of your eco-industrial parks across several dimensions of environmental, social, and governance standards. So do you want to give us a feeling of how you measured those performances, and where do you see a room to refine that measurement process? Thank you.
Thank you, Jacobo, and thank you for the question. The World Bank, GIZ, UNIDO joint Eco-Industrial Parks International Framework for Eco-Industrial Parks, it lists a number of criteria, and the requirement is to go beyond compliance in any country. Every country has many requirements with respect to environmental, social, and also under the economy title, economic compliance. Just giving you an example, countries would have regulations on emissions, from any business of hazardous, whether it's about air pollution, water pollution, or soil pollution. So we have a list of those in the framework. Under the social compliance, we have a similar list on employee and well-being, plus the well-being of the communities. Under economic, it is required that everyone in the park and the park itself as an entity performs well with respect to disclosure requirements, reporting, fiscal, financial, whatever. So this is the basis. For countries who may be lacking these, we also provide a list of international guidance or conventions and so on, so that they can maybe start looking at that. But the whole framework, as I said, there are 50+ indicators under 4 topics. And those 4 topics are asking people to comply with the national regulations and go beyond. Try to go beyond the renewable energy average of the country. Go beyond the one of the social requirements. Like, for example, a lot of parks don't reach out to their communities to work with them to make sure that these communities are comfortable and even benefit. For example, if the park has electricity and the community doesn't have electricity, that's something you can do as a park. You can afford it, so you can provide the village, the community with some arrangements. So these are relative but measurable targets. There are targets for each indicator to go beyond this, to go beyond your compliance and this much above. So, but it's a start, right? So you cannot have measures that are global unless it's a convention, right? So this provides good guidance to everyone who is interested in going beyond their national compliance requirements to achieve higher, to reach higher than the national in each of these areas where we find also as minimum, right? Our indicators are also a minimum. So that is why if you are an eco-industrial park, you are a great attraction for investors, particularly foreign investors. I hope this sufficiently addresses the question.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Ms. Tass, also for this comment. So the message, I guess, go beyond and don't stop. Be ambitious also from this perspective, and don't stop to what is required. Simply what is required. Anyways, I want to thank all the speakers that participated. Now we have a final segment where we, as I mentioned at the very beginning, we will present the awards, the Global Free Zones Awards, the SFDR Intelligence we produce every year, and we have just published the 2021 iteration just a couple of weeks ago. These are awards that every year we produce. This year we received entry from 70 zones across the globe, and we had a judging panel of 5 judges, and 4 of them will be with us today after this brief video, and they will discuss also best practices and what they share some of their thoughts when it comes to also assessing what free zones are doing at the moment. So I would ask production if they can play this video with a couple of familiar faces, and then we can also introduce the remaining speakers. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 edition of FDI's Global Free Zones of the Year Awards.
Our annual flagship awards where we set out to find the best free zones in the world.
In this last 2021 edition, we received entries from 70 free zones across the 5 continents.
The entries were then assessed by a judging panel made up by 4 external judges that feature amongst the world's most prominent experts in this field. Richard Baldwin, who is the Director of Investment and Research at the UN's Conference on Trade and Development.
Preston Martin, who is the CEO at Free Zones Consultancy Adrianople Group.
Tony Restel, the CEO at Free Zones Consultancy Development Services International.
Kavan Bandari, the Global Director of FDI Consultancy for WAFTEC.
And on top of these 4 external judges, Jacobo and I also joined the judging panel.
This edition of the Global Free Zones of the Year Awards inevitably felt like a special one, Alex. Free zones have been on the front line of the fight against the pandemic in the past 18 months. Most of them had to push through dramatic short-term adjustments to guarantee a certain level of business continuity, as well as long-term adjustments to safeguard their investment appeal beyond the COVID-19 pandemic.
And they had to do this right at a time when international organisations like the OECD are calling for increased transparency to counter illicit trade. Alongside that, the G20 is putting its weight behind proposals of a global minimum corporate tax rate, which casts a shadow on the typical kinds of fiscal incentives offered by many zones.
Those zones that have set a benchmark for best practices during the pandemic will thrive and show a path to success for other zones to follow, which is why I'm looking forward to announcing the winners of the 2021 iteration of FDI's Global Free Zones of the Year Awards.
Shall we start then? In this video, we will announce the main overall winners. For the full list and more details about the reasoning behind them, please visit our website fdiintelligence.com. But without further ado, let's start with Africa. The award for Best Free Zone in Africa goes to the Mauritius Freeport, while the Lagos Free Zone has been highly commended.
The award for Best Free Zone in Asia Pacific goes to Dalian Free Trade Zone in China, while Shanghai's Waigakiao Free Trade Zone has been highly commended.
On to Europe now. The award for Best Free Zone in Europe goes to Katowice Special Economic Zone in Poland, while the Łódź Special Economic Zone has been highly commended.
The award for Best Free Zone in the Americas goes to Coyol Free Zone in Costa Rica, while Cayman Enterprise City has been highly commended.
The award for Best Free Zone in the Middle East goes to Dubai's DMCC, while Ajman Free Zone has been highly commended.
Alex, these were the regional winners, but we have yet to name the best free zones globally. And here we are. The award for Best Free Zone of the Year 2021 globally goes to Dubai's DMCC, which wins it for the 7th time in a row, while Mauritius Freeport has been highly commended.
This is truly a matter of pride for the Mauritius Freeport to be recognized by FDI Magazine's Global Free Zone as the global runner-up for the Global Free Zone Award. It is indeed a recognition for our Freeport zone, which has distinguished itself 30 years later as a commercial free zone offering more than 400,000 square meters of modern facilities, which includes warehouses, processing and industrial units, open air storage and offices. Currently, there are 220 companies engaged in business activities, employing some 3,500 people. Despite the global pandemic, the Freeport continues to be a driver of growth, with committed investments to the tune of $140 million for Freeport infrastructural development, both at the port and airport. I am truly overwhelmed today that our efforts in the Freeport sector has been recognized through this award, and it is an honor to thank the jury members and FDI Magazine for contemplating Mauritius for this magnificent award.
It gives me a great pleasure to accept the top 10 70 Global Free Zone of the Year on this award, and I would really to thank His Highness Sheikh Ahmed, the chairman of the board of the Ajman Free Zone Authorities, for his daily I would say vision and guidance through our policies and our procedures, and the whole team who has really pushed so much hard and put so much hard work into this. I would like to thank as well our business partners who believed in us and were continuing with us, and we are pursuing for more and more. What's coming is more and more, I think, achievements, and we're looking forward to achieve that in the coming few years. Thank you very much.
Congratulations again to the overall winners. As always, we also identified the best free zones for both large and small tenants. The Global Award for small and medium tenants goes to the West of England Enterprise Zone, while Dubai's DMCC was awarded Best Zone for large tenants.
Thanks again to all the 70 zones that participated. These were the overall winners, but we also asked our judging panel to single out the best zones across a number of individual categories that we believe will make or break free zones in the short and long run.
Let me start then with the Excellence Award for COVID-19 response. The variety of responses we've received in this category has been truly impressive. Zones had to guarantee the safety of their employees, support their tenants financially, and also contribute to the production of personal protective equipment for their countries. The Excellence Award for Best COVID-19 Response goes to the DMCC, while Shanghai's Waiga Kio has been highly commended.
Beyond the short term, zones had to adjust and reassess their business propositions for the long term, as the global economy emerging from the pandemic is a very different one from only a couple of years ago. The Excellence Award for Strategy Pivot goes to Mauritius Freeport, while the Watch Special Economic Zone in Poland has been highly commended.
Another element that will make or break the zones of the future is their compliance to environmental, social, and governance standards. Investors are becoming more and more demanding with regards to the sustainability profile of the locations they do business in. And the zones that are ahead of the game in terms of sustainability are likely to gain a substantial competitive advantage moving forward. The Excellence Award for ESG practices goes to Coyol Free Zone in Costa Rica, while Cayman Enterprise City has been highly commended.
Lastly, infrastructure is always a key element in the offer of any free zone. And the Excellence Award for Infrastructure Development goes to the DMCC, while Dalian Free Trade Zone has been highly commended.
Congratulations also to the zones that really set a benchmark in terms of best practices across these four categories. Let's now wrap up by discussing some of the zones that obtained an honourable mention by our judging panel. Each judge was asked to allocate honourable mentions for those zones that impressed them for any specific reason. While you can find the full list of honourable mentions on our website, fdiintelligence.com, I'm keen to discuss your honourable mention, Jacobo.
Well, Alex, my first honourable mention went to two zones, Klaipėda Free Zone in Lithuania and Watch Special Economic Zone in Poland, for their 5G readiness. Free zones are really flirting with Industry 4.0, and Klaipėda and Watch are really leading the pace when it comes to deploying 5G infrastructure and developing 5G applications such as automation or machine-to-machine platforms. My second honorable mention went to Daegu Gyeongbuk Free Economic Zone in South Korea, for its use of virtual reality and augmented reality technologies for marketing purposes during the pandemic. The zone built a virtual version of its properties and assets to best showcase these assets at distance, and held also a virtual reality and augmented reality investment summit in late 2020. Following that experience, it set up a research and development center with a private investor to foster further research and application into this kind of virtual reality and augmented reality applications. And my final honorable mention went to Panama Pacifico for off-grid power solutions. As tenants around the world become more demanding in terms of sustainability requirements, Panama Pacifico created an energy microgrid powered by solar energy panels and industrial level battery storage to meet the power needs of a specific tenant. These were my honorable mentions, Alex, but now I'm curious to hear yours.
Well, my first honorable mention went to Tatu City Special Economic Zone in Kenya. Free zones are not only centres of production and economic activity, they also play an important role in local communities. At Tatu City, free skills training has been offered to over 1,000 local people, with 83% of them securing construction work as a result of the project. In addition, Tattoo City serves 1,400 meals to local primary schools each day. This really is an example of how free zones are much more than just investment destinations. My second honourable mention is in relation to the ongoing pandemic. As we all know, vaccines are the best protection we have against COVID-19, and increasing the production of vaccine doses has been critical throughout the pandemic. At Technopolis Special Economic Zone in Russia, global pharmaceutical firm R-Firm set up a plant in just 105 days to produce the Sputnik vaccine, which was developed by the same firm, and it has since been registered in 64 countries. The plant is now producing 10 million vaccine doses per month, and this is really a great example of how free zones have been at the forefront of the fight against COVID-19.
That's really it, Alex. Once again, let me thank the 70 free zones that participated in the 2021 edition of FDI's Global Free Zones of the Year Awards, and obviously yourself and the other 4 judges that dedicated their time to assess all the entries. It's been, to say the least, an eventful 18 months period for zones across the globe, and I really can't wait to assess further progress in the next year edition of the ranking. All right, thank you also for this video. We have some of the judges with us today, Mr. Tony Russell, Mr. Preston Martin, and Mr. Alex Irving Hunt. But first, a message from Richard Baldwin from UNCTAD that was also on the panel, but unfortunately he couldn't be with us today, but left a video message for us.
Thank you very much, Jacobo. I'm really happy that FDI Markets chose to hold the Free Zones of the Year award ceremony at UNCTAD's World Investment Forum. The Free Zone of the Year award is a great initiative, I think, not only because it recognizes the efforts of zones to become more sustainable and to help tenants through difficult times this past year, but also because it helps identify good practices that are replicable and that can help other countries to improve the performance of their zones. It was also a pleasure to be on the judging panel. It gave me the chance to see many different practices and initiatives, and these will be helpful in shaping UNCTAD's technical assistance and policy advice on special economic zones. Just a few words about the judging process. FDI Markets didn't make it easy for us with the many criteria to evaluate. It was really a very thorough process. Of course, every judge will have his or her own take on the criteria, but for me, for UNCTAD, let me just mention 5 that we prioritized. First, the first one, we looked at initiatives to improve the social and environmental impact of zones and tenants in the zones, where the UN, the SDGs are at the center of our thinking. And of course, the award ceremony also just comes after the World Investment Forum session on SDG Model Zones. So this must be a priority. Second, we prioritized initiatives aimed at benefiting from regional integration processes. We heard again during the World Investment Forum that many experts, policymakers expect the growth of regional value chains to be a real trend for the coming years. So it's important to anticipate that. Third, we prioritized initiatives aimed at supporting small and medium-sized enterprises for very much the same reason. Again, SME internationalization is a trend, just like regionalization. And on top of that, of course, SMEs have had it exceptionally difficult during the pandemic, much more so than large firms. Fourth priority, of course, COVID-19 specific initiatives. And these can be actions to help tenants cope with the pandemic restrictions, but also initiatives aimed at supporting the production or trade of essential goods and medicines. And finally, fifth point, we did look especially close at developing countries. Of course, UNCTAD is a development organization, and I think we have to recognize that initiatives are all the more laudable if carried out in an environment with much more limited resources. Okay, those were our 5 priorities. I'm sure the other judges will expand on theirs. And again, it's been a great pleasure. We'll be happy to be part of the initiative again next year. and we look forward to our continued collaboration. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Richard Bowen. So let me now bring in the other 3 judges that we have with us today. Guys, we've got 11 minutes to go. So I also encourage you to be concise. And let me start with Mr. Tony Russell. Mr. Russell, do you want to share some of the comments that you consider relevant in your judging process, and how do you define best practices when it comes to an exercise like this judging of the Free Zones Awards? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, everybody. It's been a very difficult period, this COVID period. I was actually on my way back from South America and got stuck in the UK and haven't actually been home since March of last year. So my wife's wondering where I've gone. I said, I'm only going to go for 30 days and I'm still away, stuck in the UK. But in the judging process, it was very enlightening. And I thank FDI for letting me participate in that. It was also enlightening from my perspective because I get invited to go to lots of countries to speak to governments about free zones and how they can develop their economy, a second stream economy. And I basically tell them and relate to them the Dubai story. And of course, their immediate response is, Dubai has oil and that's the answer to it. But you have to say Dubai free zone started because of the imminent loss of any oil. And when you look at now what's happening in Dubai, 97% of their economy is based on non-oil and mineral related activities. So 97% is trade. I think in the last 24 months, the figures for Dubai exceed an annual free trade deal of over $500 billion US, of which the free zones have contributed something like $140 billion. So there's hope out there for everybody that's considering a free zone. And as you go around the world, whether it's a small country, a small island, or a very large developing economy, they all have the chance of starting off. When we launched Jebel Ali in 1985, we didn't really know what we were letting out of the bottle. We let the genie out of the bottle, and what you see in Dubai now is even we're amazed. We had no vision whatsoever of how big it would be. Dubai has 23 free zones, and they're all doing particularly well. And most of the other emirates around the UAE have 1 or 2 free zones, and they're all doing very well. So we use those case studies to encourage other countries to follow that. And especially in places such as Thailand, where they are reliant on tourism. Because of the COVID-19, their tourism economy has totally collapsed. We're saying to them, have a look at free zones and see what you can do. But of course, the legislation and the rule of law and everything else has to be in place. So, through these opportunities to speak with my fellow associates in this business, we have a job to do. We have a job to do to go and spread the word, to encourage people to look at free zones, to make sure that they're done properly and correctly, they're within the law, transparency, employment creation, and all the other things that go with it. And I just thank everybody for letting me participate, and I step back and let the other guys speak. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tony. I hope everything is still fine between you and your wife after this long distance, forced distance. Let me. But thanks again, and let me now move on to Mr. Professor Martin from our journal group. Mr. Martin, as we mentioned also in the video, one big development in the world of free special economic zones is the OECD blueprint for a global minimum tax and for increased transparency. And I know that you have a few comments to make on how this can affect the model of free zones moving forward. And then maybe you can also mention, I know there is a special initiative happening or just about to come online by a journal group. Maybe you can also mention that initiative. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to participate in this event, as well as the panel for the Global Free Zones of the Year report. It was incredibly interesting to review the material and get the perspective of each of the zone operators in terms of how they dealt with the pressure of COVID and where they're moving into going forward. With respect to the point about the global minimum tax, so especially over the past few months, we're seeing widespread adoption of this blueprint from the OECD for a global minimum tax, and I think that places an incredible amount of pressure on zones to look beyond the tax break and to provide more comprehensive incentives, much of which was described earlier during this session, different ways that zones can add value to and provide incentives that are more comprehensive, more holistic, have more of a focus on ESG and sustainable development. But I think this pairs with the pressures of COVID as well. We've seen quite a bit of shift to online business service centers, things like one-stop shops. Obviously, we have the ever-present importance of high-quality infrastructure and utilities, medical and daycare facilities, high-speed telecom and internet services, but also things like incubators, incubator programs for startups, and then increasingly important, tenant financing options for businesses moving into zones. These are things I think that are incredibly important to focus on for zone operators and developers going forward, especially considering the resulting effects of COVID and the global minimum tax. So just in the spirit of moving things along, because I know we don't have a ton of time, I need to make an announcement about something that my company, Adrianople Group, is launching next week, actually Monday the 25th. For about 2 years at this point, we have been working on developing the most comprehensive map of special economic zones in the world. We have been really working hard to bring this to bear, and extremely proud of what my team has been able to put together. And I'm very much looking forward to unveiling that next Monday. And I think many of you in this session, many of the attendees and speakers have received invites or have gotten snapshots of what the map will look like and the data that it brings to bear. So if you haven't received an invite, please reach out to me and I'll send you one, because we love to have you present as we launch that map, and we're looking forward to making it increasingly useful to zone operators, investors, businesses that work in the SEZ industry. So with that, I thank you again for the opportunity, and looking forward to moving into a new era for zone development and operations. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Martin, and I'm also really much looking forward to seeing this map. I think that as has also been mentioned throughout the session, there is a big need for more research to go into the models and the performances of zones, but also into the geography of zones. And so again, it's save the date, October 25th. Thank you again. And now on to my colleague, Alex Irwin Hunt. He was also part of the judging panel. So Alex, do you want to share with us some of your consideration from your judging experience on best practices of the zones that you assessed? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jacobo, and thank you, UNCTAD, for allowing me to speak today. I'll keep my comments very brief, given the timing I have left. But of course, yeah, I've just to echo what Tony just said. I mean, it's been a very difficult year with the ongoing pandemic, the increasing prominence of climate change risk and some extreme weather events. So clearly, it's been a year in which we've had to take stock of what the reality is of operating global businesses in free zones around the world. Maybe I'll just focus on one specific point, because I think it's lots of them have been covered well by the other panelists and the other sessions earlier today. But maybe it's sort of echoing what Gustavo was saying earlier from AFSA. Free zones really are all about people and community, not only the tenants within them and the tenants' employees, but of course the communities that surround them. And I think one thing that really stood out to me during the judging process, but there were many zones that really stepped up to the plate to help their local communities. And I mentioned Tatu City in Kenya in that video earlier because of their workforce training programs, but equally there were zones that have recreational facilities. We needed time to unwind during these difficult times of the pandemic, and there was plenty of examples of how zones really played a critical role, not just as economic activity hubs, but also in their local communities. I'll stop there, Jacobo, as I see the time, but thank you very much, and over to you.
All right, thank you, Alex, also for your concise intervention. I would just like, from my own perspective, I was also part of the judging panel. I think that something that really impressed me was the level of involvement of some zones in setting an agenda for the energy transition. Obviously, a key element of any sustainable development model and any ESG standard. I would like to mention one particular zone, or actually all the zones in China, all the entries from zones in China that we received were involved in the development of a green building agenda, embedding, for example, solar panels, PV panels in the construction materials, in the facade of buildings, the new buildings moving forward. So this is again, and this goes back to what we discussed, the idea of Chinese zones being a test bed also for policies in this space. We have seen zones, a particular zone in Panama that we also mentioned, that set up off-grid solar-powered energy supply to meet the requirements of some of their tenants. So I think that, and these are just like a couple of examples, but I know that many other zones are active in this space. And I think that this will, as I also mentioned at the very beginning, investors are actively seeking parks and zones where they can source green power. And this is becoming really a deal breaker when it comes to investment decisions. This is really it also from my end. Just a couple of closing remarks. It's been a really dense session. I lost count of all the speakers, but I really want to thank each one of you also for sticking to your time references. Not always to your time slots. Not always easy, but you all you all were very successful in this. So thank you very much to all of you. Thank you, UNCTAD, for organizing this session on such a vital topic, and thank to all the audience for staying with us throughout. So I know that let me also thank Iman and Amelia that were on the UNCTAD's production side that did such a great job in putting everything together. And I've got a special request for them. They would like to take a group picture from the session. So I would just like encourage everyone to turn on their cameras so that and put on a big smile, just like to wrap up this session so that we can also make them happy. Iman, if you want to take it from here, give us a countdown, and we can put on our best smile. I don't hear you.
Do we go to the a certain view, a gallery or something?
No, I will take it. We're fine. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's go 1, 2, 3. Yes.
Okay, I guess this is really it. So thanks again, everyone, and until the next World Investment Forum. Thank you.